So in this session, we are also going to have one presentation which will be done in Portuguese, but we have requested that a summary of what has been presented be given to the English speakers so that you can get an understanding of what the speaker was talking about. My name is Motseki Tlatwayo. I'm with SADC Secretariat as the Technical Advisor for Fisheries. This session is hosted by SADC Secretariat together with the Benguela Current Convention Secretariat. And it's a session based on the outcomes of the work that was done in the 3 countries or member states of the Benguela Current Convention, which are all members of SADC. And it's really around the building climate resilience and adaptive capacities in small-scale fisheries and aquaculture in Southern Africa. There will be case studies that are shared, and there will be policy take-homes as a summary of the discussions. The outcome of this discussion has already been consolidated into what we call a declaration. The intention is that small-scale fisheries, like you've heard throughout the day, are too big to ignore. And in order for us to ensure that their contribution is sustained, is for us to ensure that we build those adaptive capacities and resilience. Now, as a start, I just want to read a statement, and it really links to what transpired recently at COP27 in Egypt. There was a case that was made that as we transition to a greener economy or a more greener economy, maybe there are certain fundamentals that we need to look into, because that transition is important for the survival of the people and the planet. But how do we realize blue prosperity if we don't safeguard? Especially from our oceans, rivers, and lakes. We need to safeguard the future and the well-being of millions and billions of people. In actual fact, if those of you who were following the news, on the 15th of November, world population turned 8 billion. And sustaining those mouths requires us to think differently about how we safeguard the future of the fisheries and aquaculture sectors. Fish and other aquatic foods, of course, we are all aware that they provide essential source of protein and other nutrients. And it's almost 3 to 4 billion people worldwide that benefit from these resources. I wish to welcome my co-chair, Mr. Nico, who has just joined. Nico.
Good afternoon, Dr. Motseki, and good afternoon, colleagues, and thanks everybody for joining our session this afternoon. I think Dr. Motseki has done really well to introduce our session and also where the speakers are coming from. And perhaps just to add is that we would like to hear from the colleagues what has been the actual experience in trying to raise the climate resilience and adaptive capacities, and just to look at potential lessons and good practices that could be useful for the rest of the SADC region. Yes, Doctor?
Just a minute, we can't hear you, so we are fixing the speakers.
All right, Doc.
Yes. say something?
Good afternoon, 1, 2. Anybody? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead, Nico.
All right, Chief. Thank you, Dr. Hlachwayo, and thanks for the introduction. Just briefly, the speakers from our region, they have all tested different approaches to building climate resilience and adaptive capacities, particularly of communities that are dependent on the ocean and on fisheries for income and livelihood. And I'm hoping that through the presentations, we can also pick up on some lessons and good practices that could be useful for SADC and especially for all the sub-Saharan African countries. But thank you, Dr. Hlachwayo, for the great introduction. I'm here to be of any assistance throughout our session. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Nico. Without wasting time, I think I'm going to request the speakers to be ready in this order. Dr. Caitlin Francis, if you are ready and your presentation is ready, I'm going to request you to come and sit here because you have to be on Zoom so that you can also talk to the guys who have joined virtual. And will be followed by a presentation from Angola and a presentation from Namibia, as well as a presentation from South Africa. After the 4 presentations, we will wrap it up by a discussion by Dr. Chimatiro. I can't see him. He's there at the back. So Dr. Chimatiro will summarize the discussion and will open it up for question and answers. Feel free to ask a question in any language. I'm sure your neighbor will be able to transmit a message. Because as SADC and the Benguela Current Convention, we very inclusive, and we would like to promote that inclusivity and better dialogue using your key languages. So Caitlin, without wasting time, please come forward.
All right, hello everyone. I'm not used to sitting and talking at a presentation, but I'll give this a go. My name is Caitlin Francis, and I've had the privilege of working with the BCC through one project and sort of historically through another. And I'll be talking a little bit about the work I'm doing right now. But before we jump into that, I need to set the scene. There we go. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with the Benguela Large marine ecosystem and what it entails, but I thought let me share broadly what this whole system is about. So the BCLME is sort of hugs the southwestern coastline of Africa and encompasses the coastal nations of Angola, Namibia, and South Africa. It is an incredibly productive system. And in fact, is one of the most important fishing areas in the Southern African Development Community region. There we go. And to this end, it provides a great deal of food and livelihoods to a large number of coastal communities that reside along its shores. And research has shown that actually, if you look across all of the large marine ecosystems, the BCLME is, if not the most productive, one of the most productive ecosystems available on the planet. If you look at a snapshot of the BCLME, what makes it so productive? Well, it has an extremely high primary productivity, upwards of 1,000 milligrams of carbon per square meter per day, which is enormous. This is the underpinning really of a diverse and rich fish stock, which includes rock lobster, cards, various other white fish, and predominantly sardines and anchovies. And you can see here, I've included a graph actually from one of our co-chairs, Nico Villis's paper, which beautifully outlines the many different oceanic systems that are in play that result in this incredibly productive upwelling system. And this system actually underpins vital commercial, artisanal or small scale and recreational fishing operations, which in turn, of course, feeds large populations, has a great underpinning for economies, etc. But as was so ably put by one of our other chairs, climate change is impacting this system. And research has shown that it will continue to impact this productive upwelling system with reductions in wind leading to shifting species, etc. But when we look at small-scale fisheries and climate change in the BCLME, if we look down at the nitty-gritty details, we'll see that climate change actually threatens to disrupt the livelihoods of small-scale fishers and displace coastal communities who have been there for generations upon generations. And so the anticipated consequences in the fishery sector include falling productivity, species migrations, which make it result largely in fishers having to expend large amounts of money to move along coasts to fish species that they know to be high value, and in some cases, even localized extinctions. And the knock-on effect of this change is that we then have a threat to food security on top of these myriad of other stresses that these communities face. And therefore, climate change tends to represent an additional stressor over and above these massive stresses that are influencing these communities already, which has driven the nations which make up the BCLME, and of course, many other nations across the world, to look into what can we do to enhance resilience of small-scale fishers, because this is an urgent and important area to look into. So a lot of the work that I'll be talking from here stems from the work that I did with the BCC, and the crux of it is more of a bottom-up approach, is looking at climate change from a fisher's perspective. So the Benguela current nations, as I said earlier, are made up of Angola, Namibia, and South Africa. And in this BCC climate change project, there were a number of communities selected, predominantly in Angola, but of course also in Namibia and in South Africa. And thanks to really wonderful training under Dr. Soman, there was a two-phased approach to building resilience and adapting to climate change, envisioned as a way to really start tackling what climate change looks like for fishers. And this two-phased approach was to first assess the vulnerability of those selected fisher communities, sort of as a litmus test, as it were, to how climate change was impacting these people. And then using that rapid vulnerability assessment, which I'll talk about a bit about more later, co-develop frameworks or later, hopefully, plans to adapt to climate change. And so it becomes a sort of build upon each other approach, using fisher knowledge, implementing it, and translating that into the sorts of information that would reach people in higher positions and assist them in making decisions that might enhance the resilience of these communities. So as I mentioned, the rapid vulnerability assessment methodology was pioneered by Dr. Soman in Romackers, and I know Dr. Soman is around here somewhere. And this methodology is an eight-stage guided process. So it's largely spent over 2 days for the most part. You can limit it a little. And it's informed almost entirely by fisher knowledge and their experience. And taking that fisher knowledge and literally not adding anything really from your perspective to it, but just transforming that knowledge into accessible to scientists' knowledge. And the very last stage of that RVA provides the skeleton really for adaptation actions that the community would like to do. So they are the ones who recognize how climate change is impacting them, and then how do they envision really moving beyond or learning to adapt or enhancing areas of their lives that might allow them to deal with these climate change stresses. And so that adaptation framework and eventual plan is in a very large way co-developed with fishers. And this is a central focus to enhancing resilience through multiple avenues. And those avenues can include, for example, internal structural formations like fisher associations, or in fact, external systems like having the government support them with the development of, for example, in one of the areas, a more functional jetty. So it really is a bottom-up approach that is collaborative. Through the, I think, roughly 18 months of work that I worked with across those 3 SADC nations, there were several obstacles that were actually shared amongst fishers, which is perhaps not very surprising because of the limits to development that those 3 nations have had. So those obstacles tend to fall within governance, socioeconomic, and environmental spheres. And when looking at these a lot more closely, it was very easy to see how those things sort of fed into one another. And when you're going through the development of an adaptation framework with the community, which is oftentimes in the form of a workshop or a talking workshop in which you're guiding the community through questions or ideas to sort of pull from them what they already have within themselves, ideas about how to better their own lives, because who knows better than these fishers themselves. And so that challenge, that workshop challenge, if we call it that, becomes the driver of information for strategy development. And fishers, if I looked at, there were a vast number of strategies that were developed, but the key ones that were sort of shared amongst them were sort of necessary to enhance their resilience to climate change. And so I just selected the top 3, which are increased fisher organization through cooperatives or fisher associations. And this is organization at different scales. For example, in Angola, it would be to get more fishers to be even more involved in the already existing cooperatives, which are well supported through governance, versus in Namibia, where this sort of process is only sort of more nascent, as the fisheries guidelines have only recently been sort of put together. The second one, which is just across the board an agreed strategy for enhancing their resilience, is to develop new markets for their products. And a lot of the focus has been local, which local to a lot of fishers seems to be a regional approach, what we would call, and then internationally. And the last one is something that I think fishers think about, but often think that is outside of their scope of access, is to develop mariculture and aquaculture where it's possible. So for the rest of the talk, and actually for the rest of the work that I've been doing in the last about 9 months, I want to focus a lot on how we could develop new markets for products and explore aquaculture, mariculture. And how to do this would be using trade as a vehicle for enhancing resilience. And when I talk about trade, I'm talking about small-scale fisheries trade, not only within a particular country, but within a region, and then within Africa broader. And this is underpinned by the African Continental Free Trade Area and its commitment to fisheries. I have been privileged for the last 9 months to work with another consultancy with the African Continental Free Trade Area to address some of the goals that they have in relation to fisheries and small-scale fishers in particular. And this is, number 1, exploring the potential for the establishment of sustainable regional fishery resource value chains for both marine and freshwater fisheries under the free trade area, and to convene stakeholders for the development of a fisheries protocol for Africa in the context of the free trade area. And this is all under the auspices of the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat, helping to remove barriers to trade for small-scale fishers and enhancing their ability to maximize their products. And when I had the opportunity to really look closely, so this project that I was working on is in effect a pilot project looking at 5 countries, which represent sort of pinpoints as 5 regions of fisheries. And we selected Angola as the southern regional fishery starting point. And why Angola? Well, it is a highly productive coastline. There's well over 1,060 kilometers of coastline, most of it flat. It is a well-developed capture fisheries, and it's currently getting involved in aquaculture. And when you look at the artisanal small-scale fishery side of things, while the numbers vary, the general consensus is that there's over 100 artisanal fishing communities in Angola alone. And with most of them concentrated in the northern provinces. And interestingly enough, Angola is the second largest consumer of fish on the African continent. Fishing is the third most important sector to their economy. And tied into their consumption of fish, it's reflected in the fact that 25% of their protein intake is fish-based. So fishing, therefore, has a key role in combating hunger and poverty and ensuring national food security in Angola. But the caveat to this is that currently Angola imports roughly 80% of its food needs. If we then look at a Nature report that I skimmed through quite a while ago, if you look very closely, I hope you can see, it talks in this report about how dependent sub-Saharan Africa is on fisheries resources and artisanal fisheries to provide its nutrients. And this is something that I highlighted earlier. But if you look at this, if you look at the lower half of this chart, you'll see that at the same time as this area is dependent on fisheries for food resources, the percentage change in catch is upwards of 20% estimated in the next 30 years. So there's going to be a decreased amount of fish caught, but a highly dependent growing nation in this area. So this means that this needs to be addressed now to sort of help prevent any issues for Angola in the future. And indeed for a lot of those sub-Saharan West African countries. So if we look a little bit closer at Angola, marine fish production is split evenly across the semi-industrial and artisanal fishery sector. So what do I mean by that? I mean that, for example, when looking at the fish production recorded in 2021, artisanal fisheries accounted for 49% of the fish caught in Angola. Most of that is consumed within the community. And artisanal fisheries is therefore the predominant way in which food provision is met for coastal communities. The rest of that, if it's not, well, how the chain works is that it is sold to a local buyer or wholesaler, and then it's usually women. So this is how women are becoming involved into the Angolan artisanal sector. They will then sell that on as part of the larger chain. And so you see that while fishing is largely still considered to be a male-dominated activity, women and young people are slowly becoming more recognized within the sector. If you look over on the right, on the right-hand side, and this is just trade statistics from Angola in the last 20 years. You'll see around 2002, there's a shift, and this of course aligns with when the civil war ended in Angola, where the country went from being a net exporter to a net importer of fish products. And while in the last 5 years, the gap has narrowed, there's still a major trade deficit existing in Angola in terms of its fish exports versus its imports. And if you look at the numbers for this, the FAO data would place this as roughly in 2019 at least, Angola spent upwards of 163 million on fish imports compared to only 70 million that it exported in the same time. So as a consultant, when I was looking at this, it represented as a real area in which the removal of trade barriers between African nations could help lessen threats to food security, strengthen economic ties within African member states, and contribute to poverty alleviation, all of which are pillars to enhancing resilience to climate change. So the background photo there is actually of a market in Luanda, really interesting space to be in. One of the key things that came from the work that we've been doing is that there needs to be an accelerated development of hygienic processing facilities and broader market engagement in the small-scale fishery sector in Angola. So we chatted with fisher communities in Tomboa and Capacities, and these fishers are incredibly clued up on what needs to be done to maximize what they can get out of their fisheries product. One of the clear developments is that commonplace needs to be basic hygiene and fish processing knowledge. And that includes having already, while there are some additional fish cleaning facilities, space for post-harvest activities and refrigeration, and additional training on food handling, packaging, and curing processes. And this can happen together with the Artisanal Fisheries Institute in Angola, which is one of, I think, the strongest sort of institutional structures that I've seen on the African continent in support of artisanal fisheries. This is an incredible model on which we can build for the rest of Africa. And so putting together the progress that we have made will help us to support fishers to increase the market value of their catch, which of course will lead to more income, which will help them to be at least a little bit buffered from the impacts that climate change will have on their livelihoods. Secondly, there needs to be a full value chain development for marine and inland primary species. The modern value chain looks as something in which you as the primary harvester delivers a completed product to your end user, thereby gaining the maximum value out of that product. But in Angola, oftentimes this is not the case. They export extremely high value products such as shrimp and crab. They don't get the maximum value out of those stock, and usually they benefit the least. And if you look at work like now, almost 13 years ago by De Silva, it's important, and he has recognized that the transformation of fish products has a vital role to play in improving supply and value chains in Angola. And this is key to making sure that Angola is able to support its artisanal fisheries communities and able to help them become more resilient to the stresses that are coming their way. So if I look at the African Continental Free Trade Area, some of the opportunities that we pinpointed was that the African Continental Free Trade Area will permit Angola to gain access to key African markets, which should facilitate increased trade in fisheries products. Artisanal fishers will therefore be able to access markets in Africa without having to pay high tariffs, because high tariffs could lead to increased food insecurity. And addressing the distribution infrastructure issues, not only within the Angolan market, but within the broader African market, could help fishing communities access more profitable markets for their goods. And so, yeah, that's roughly where I'm going to end my chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. Very interesting talk. Nico.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes, two sentences for you.
Yes, thank you, Caitlin, for that really thorough overview of the work in Angola. I'm aware, that in addition to trying to look at post-harvest value chain improvements, we potentially need to look at what could be other viable livelihood alternatives. Even a few weeks ago, being in Angola, we learned again about the plight of the local fisher people along the coast, and what could be the sort of blue economy alternatives for them in the event that fishing becomes such a challenging sector to enable livelihood sustainability. So I do not know, Caitlin, if you have anything to add, perhaps based on what you're researching, to tell us what could be the additional or alternative livelihood mechanisms, particularly for Angola.
Can we hold on to that question until discussion time, Nico? I think Caitlin has noted it, and she will come back with a response to that. But thank you for that. Can I then request Angola to give a presentation?
Olá, muito boa tarde a todos. Hi, good afternoon to everyone. É grande privilégio para mim estar aqui. It's a great privilege for me to be here. Eu sou Ildefonso Mukwenja, venho de Angola. Is Ilde Mukwenja Afonso from Angola. Vou fazer a apresentação em português e o meu colega aqui vai passar em inglês. So to make English and Portuguese, so I'm going to try my best to convey in between. Muito bem. A província de Benguela foi beneficiada com projeto da IPCC. The Benguela province was benefited from the project IPCC. Este projeto consiste no cultivo comunitário de mexilhão da espécie perna-perna. The project is building of mexilhão, somebody say bival. Mussels, yes. Okay. E tudo porque aquela comunidade tinha necessidade de aperfeiçoamento no que diz respeito ao cultivo de mexilhão. This all was because the community had a need to improve the culture of mussel. Mas antes de aprofundarmos o nosso projeto, queríamos pegar aqui em alguns conceitos genéricos sobre a aquicultura e a pesca a nível mundial. But before going to it, we'd like to talk about agriculture and fisheries worldwide. Segundo a FAO, de 1968 a 2018, a aquicultura a nível mundial cresceu de 6% a 52% de todas as capturas a nível mundial. According to FAO data, the aquaculture growth from 6% to 62% from para estes gráficos, I believe that looking at these graphics nos passa a impressão que temos que trabalhar muito quanto à agricultura. Give us the impression that we have too much to work on aquaculture. Tenho certeza de que muitos países aqui presentes partilhamos dos mesmos problemas quanto à pesca artesanal. We do believe that so many countries which are here present are sharing the same problems regarding to artisanal fisheries. E que a aquicultura vem como uma resposta a estes problemas. And the aquaculture comes as a response to these problems. Desta feita, dando sequência. So that's giving sequence. O projeto era feito em estruturas de cabos de nylon. The project was made on structure of nylon ropes. E que estes cabos, haviam alguns cabos long lines. Among the ropes, some of them were long lines. Onde fixávamos as sementes. They were fixed the seeds. As sementes eram fixadas a partir de uma rede chamada, uma rede de algodão biodegradável. So the seeds were fixed on the multi-filament nets which are biodegradable. Nós vemos, tem uma foto aqui dos mexilhões selvagens. Yeah, the pictures here of mushroom, so wild mushroom.
Nós pegávamos os
Massive.
filhotes destes
Massive.
mexilhões e fixávamos nas estruturas.
Then that was taken and fixed it to the structure. Sorry, not mushroom, but metal.
Mas também o projeto teve algumas ações formativas.
Then the project also had some training actions or sections.
Salienta aqui dizer que este projeto está constituído por 2 grupos técnicos.
This project has got 2 technical groups.
Tem o grupo técnico que é responsável pelas infraestruturas.
There's one which responds for infrastructures.
Tem a responsabilidade da construção e manutenção das estruturas.
Which has got the responsibility of building and maintaining of the infrastructures.
Está constituído pelo IPA, o Instituto de Desenvolvimento da Pesca Artesanal.
Well, and is constituted by IPA, which is the Institute of Development of Small-Scale Fisheries,
que faz o
artisanal fisheries,
que faz o trabalho das construções com alguns cooperantes.
which builds with some foreign help.
Quem está em frente desse projeto é uma cooperativa denominada o Mexilhão Ieto.
Who is in front of the project is a cooperative called our Mushroom.
Depois de termos feito o escape, passamos para uma outra estrutura de madeira.
After ropes, then we turn to other structure, which is wooden structure.
Porque algumas estruturas haviam acabado de ser vandalizadas.
Because some structures were damaged.
Então, havia necessidade de se construir uma estrutura mais duradoura e à prova de furto.
Then we had to make another structure much more resilient and not easy to ruin.
Vemos também ações formativas de capacitação técnica com as mulheres da comunidade.
Then we can also see some training sections with community women.
Antes do projeto, as senhoras já recolhiam os mexilhões e vendiam sem o processamento adequado.
Before the project, the women gathered and sell the products without processing.
Havia necessidade de treiná-las quanto ao processamento do mexilhão.
Then there were need to train them on processing.
Foram treinadas um total de 59 mulheres.
Then we trained a total of 59 women.
Quanto ao processamento, só contabilizamos mulheres porque elas é que são responsáveis pelo processamento e venda do mexilhão.
Then we also count women because women which are responsible for processing and selling.
Vemos sequência
Then we see the sequence
do processamento e embalamento.
of processing and packaging.
O processamento consiste na limpeza do mexilhão.
Processing consists on cleaning of the mushroom.
Esta limpeza é feita a partir de uma faca e uma escova.
And it starts from a knife and brush.
Isto acaba trazendo outro desafio, que é o da higiene no trabalho.
That brings another challenge, which is hygiene on work.
É aconselhável a utilização de luvas anticortes.
It's recommended to use anti-cut gloves.
É recomendável a utilização de tocas e aventais mais duradouros.
Then use the dress to protect the hair.
Vemos aqui a continuidade do processamento do mexilhão.
Then we can see the process, how it's done continually.
Este projeto trouxe grande valia para aquela comunidade.
This project brought much more value for the community.
Antes do projeto, fazia-se captura desregradas naquela comunidade.
Before the project, the capture were following non rule or
capturas de espécies proibidas,
catching of forbidden species.
as praias não eram limpas frequentemente,
The beaches were not cleaned frequently.
mas o projeto trouxe uma consciencialização quanto às capturas e quanto à limpeza das praias.
And the project brought awareness on the need of keeping the beaches clean and catching of the mushroom.
Tanto que até hoje alguns membros da cooperativa que anteriormente enveredavam com estas práticas aconselham os outros a deixarem tais práticas.
And then today we found some members of the cooperative which before they were using harmful processes. Now they are warning others to follow the due measures.
Anteriormente vendiam o mexilhão não processado, agora vendem processado, e isto agregou valor na venda deles.
Before the mussels were sold non-processed. Today they sell processed, which added value on the product.
Tem outro grupo que é responsável pela análise microbiológica, que é responsabilizado pelo CIP, Centro de Investigação Pesqueira.
There is another group which is responsible for macrobiology analysis, which is done by CIP. It's a biology research center.
Porque pensamos que não adianta produzir alimento, é preciso produzir alimento seguro.
Because it's useful just to produce the food, but it's needed to produce it in a secure way.
Então, esta aptidão vem trazer exatamente a segurança para que se faça uma comercialização daquele produto saudável para as pessoas.
This knowledge brings security so that the goods which are being sold to the community will be secure.
Este grupo também passou por um treinamento.
This group also passed through training.
Vemos ali o laboratório do CIP Lubito.
So we can see the CIP Lubito lab.
Os que estiverem aqui estejam à vontade de um dia nos visitar na província de Benguela.
So please, we invite you to visit one of these days, if possible, in Benguela province.
Serão muito bem recebidos.
And then you are welcome.
O projeto também traz uma gestão e planeamento estratégico.
The project also has got one more component, which is strategic management.
Ou seja, é uma forma de sustentabilizar a atividade.
It's a way of giving the activity sustainability.
A nossa intenção é que um dia aquela cooperativa possa comercializar o mexilhão para outros países.
Our view is that this cooperative can one of these days sell this mushroom to other countries.
Desde muito cedo é importante ir falando já de marketing e de publicidade.
So that's why now it's important to talk about markets and the publicity.
Para que não seja novidade quando chegar o momento.
So that then will be no news when the moment arrives.
Teve também uma ação de degustação para a valorização do produto.
And there's also been a taste moment for product value.
Foi preciso tirar os membros da comunidade e levá-los à cidade para provarem do mexilhão bem preparado.
There was a need to check community members from their place to the city so that the mushroom could be tasted.
Eles fazem a comercialização já há muitos anos, mas disseram que parece que nunca haviam provado o mexilhão tal como foi preparado.
They are selling it for a long time, but it looked like was something new in the way the thing were prepared.
Tem aqui uma previsão de produção.
There is a focus of the production.
A cooperativa é constituída por 35 elementos.
The cooperative has got 35 people.
Sendo 15 homens e 20 mulheres.
Those 15 are men and the 20 are women.
Se observarmos bem o 2022, com um investimento de 3 milhões e 500,
when you look at the 2022 with the investment of 3 million and 500,000.
Podemos ter uma produção de 3 toneladas e 600 quilogramas.
Then we can have a production of 3 tons and 600 kg.
Mas como o tempo está a nos deixar, vamos avançar para a previsão também por aproximação.
When time is going, so going to do general overview of the production.
Em 12 meses de cultivo,
in 12 months of culture,
com receita pode-se gastar pode-se ter receitas de 9,98%.
We can have the income of 9.98%
e os custos de 90%.
And the costs of 90%.
Tudo porque os primeiros 9 meses são os meses de investimento.
That due to that the first 9 months are months of investment.
Por isso que as receitas são baixas.
That's why the incomes are lower.
Se formos na última linha,
on last line,
vamos ver que vai ter uma receita de 62%, 62,80%.
Then we'll see that the income will be of 62.8%.
Com custos de 37,20%.
Or with costs of 37.2%.
Este projeto sempre trouxe a vertente de consciencialização quanto à poluição do ambiente.
This project also brought the awareness on the environment pollution.
Bem, dizer que nós, enquanto técnicos do Instituto de Desenvolvimento da Pesca Artesanal,
we, as technicians of the Institute for Development of Small-Scale Fisheries,
sentimos-nos muito agradecidos pela IPCC.
We feel ourselves so due to IPCC.
E acreditamos que a comunidade também sente-se muito agradecida.
And we believe that this is also the same feeling of the community.
Que esta prática deve continuar porque só assim poderemos preservar melhor os nossos oceanos.
We feel that this process should go ahead because only this way we're going to preserve our oceans.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you so much.
Muito obrigado por uma apresentação interessante. Thank you very much. We will quickly move to a presentation by South Africa, by Eletu Duna.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eletu Duna. I work for the Benguela Current Convention. I work on a project that aims to enhance resilience to the impact of climate change within the Benguela Current Large Marine Ecosystem region based in South Africa. Today, I'm going to present on lessons that I've learned from one of the communities that we work with, in which I've observed that community-based public-private partnerships can be used as a tool to build resilience. To start off, the objective of our project is to build resilience through reducing vulnerability and increasing adaptive capacity within the marine fisheries sector of the BCLME by implementing adaptation strategies in order to ensure food and livelihood security. Now, in order to deliver on that objective, what we did was conduct rapid vulnerability assessments in the communities that we worked with, which is a participatory process that assesses environmental and climate-related stresses. It looks at changes in terms of livelihoods within the communities and then develops strategies that people can use to cope with and adapt to those stresses. Now, during this process, you come up with a list of adaptation strategies that are validated by the communities. You use these in the adaptation planning process where you use an adaptation matrix and you populate it with information from the fishers, information that they believe or understand as to how these actions can be developed and implemented within their community. All of this then culminates in the development of community-based adaptation plans. So we did this work in Humansdorp, and for them, really adaptation presented itself as business development for the Elinye Fishing Cooperative. Now, this is due to the fact that government is busy implementing the small-scale fishery policy for South Africa, where you have small-scale fishers who are granted communal fishing rights, and then they have to then form cooperatives. For many of the fishers from Humansdorp, they used to work in the squid fishery as crew members. And so for them, in order to be able to fully utilize these fishing rights, which consist of a basket list of species, they really needed a lot of support in terms of access to finance, infrastructure, resources, capacity development, access to markets. So this was all part of their adaptation. Within that community, you had a number of organizations that were working with that cooperative. You had the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, who are implementing the small-scale fisheries policy in which they granted the cooperative fishing rights. You had us, BCC, working with the cooperative to build resilience to climate change. And really some of the work that we did with them also sort of resulted in, you've got about almost 30 strangers who are bound together by these fishing rights. And so they had to sort of organize themselves and work together. So a lot of the work that we did really sort of strengthened that cooperative. And then you've got Globally, which is an energy company in the private sector that is conducting business development as part of their social corporate responsibility. So basically, as these three organizations, we were sort of able to come together and pull resources together. And for me, that sort of manifested itself as, that collaboration manifested itself as a community-based public-private partnership. Really, sort of, in order for that to be successful, we had to sort of look at, roles and responsibilities between, these different entities. For government, really, they were the sort of the bedrock of this collaboration through their integrated development strategy. They recognize that they've granted these fishing communities with rights, and they don't have the resources or the capacity to be able to assist them to start utilizing these resources. So then what they know that so for them, they looked at or identified partners that have the financial resources, that have got the capabilities and the capacity to assist these communities, partners like ourselves and Global. And between ourselves and Global, as I've mentioned in my prior slide, as BCC, we developed the community-based adaptation plan, which was sort of really a guiding document as to how to sort of assist this community. We sort of divided and conquer in terms of who does what. Our work again was to sort of strengthen the community, actually the cooperative, in order for them to be able to work together. They, on the other hand, did trainings in terms of business, financial management, and also they provided like a lot of financial support. They sort of, in terms of getting land and access and fridges and boats and all the resources that they really need to be able to sort of fish. And we sort of did business plan and promotional material capacity development really within the confinements of the development project. So how can then community-based public-private partnerships be used as a tool to build resilience? I think from my side, that can be achieved in a number of ways. We talk about community development and empowerment through knowledge and awareness raising, small, medium, and micro enterprise development, which is where a large a number of these cooperatives fall within the business sphere. Access to finance. I don't think that this can be said enough in order for, for these people to be able to fish. And this can be in a number of ways. It could be grants, it could be loans, small scale fisheries. They are known for their lack of access to finance. Also sort of access to resources. We're talking about cooperatives that sometimes struggle with tiny things like sending an email, yet we expect these cooperatives to be able to run businesses in a very complicated global market. So those resources are really needed, as well as skills improvement through capacity development. I really think that from a private sector point of perspective, they've got the resources, they've got the money, they've got the capacity to be able to do this. And really, in order for this to sort of be successful, there needs to be trust that is built between government, between the communities, between the private sector. Like the political landscape right now, those entities don't trust each other. Communities really, small-scale fishing communities really don't trust each other. I mean, they don't trust outsiders because they've been taken advantage of. We've had things like fronting in South Africa, So really, because of years of repression and oppression, those communities really don't trust. And also, private sector doesn't like government, et cetera, et cetera. But really, for this to be able to work, we need to build trust within those different groups. And we need to sort of replicate something like this, like what we're doing in Yeman's to other communities in order for it to be successful. And I think government is going to need assistance from communities like, from organizations like the BCC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Letu. This is the last presentation, then we'll hand over to Dr. Chimatiro, who will then wrap it up for us. Then we can do a quick Q&A. Nico, are you still awake? Are you still with us?
I'm here, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you.
Yes.
Perhaps you can take over from this one.
Good afternoon once again. So my name is Katrina Ilondwa, and with this discussion, with this presentation, we're going to talk about a regional dialogue that was in partnership with the Benguela Current Convention, the Department of Fisheries in Malawi, and SADC, where we wanted to build resilience or create a dialogue where we can build resilience and adaptation in artisanal fisheries and aquaculture in Southern Africa. So with the importance of fisheries in SADC, I think we have realized that fisheries play quite a critical role in the development of local economies. It contributes to livelihoods, to food security, to the GDP of the sector, of the governments, etc. So fisheries, either inland or marine, plays quite a critical role. So as the colleagues have spoken, climate change impacts the region quite, and this is in both systems, whereby we are experiencing environmental variabilities, and we are observing either a decline in some of the species or increased temperature in both inland and marine environment. So the regional dialogue was actually, as I say, between the three partners, and it was actually enshrined in a number of international and regional conventions and agreements and protocols. And these also included in some of the continental strategies, as well as the Southern or SADC strategies. And it also spoke to the COP, or responded to the objective of COP26, and currently also COP27. So what we wanted to do with this regional dialogue, we wanted just to have a conversation with the different actors, either in small-scale fisheries or the marine sector, the development agencies, the government officials, etc., so that we can just understand like what is the importance of small-scale fisheries and subsistence fisheries in SADC region, and how can we encourage a wider national and local level recognition of other players that are in the sector, and how can we acknowledge their role as either the women and the youth that are usually not recognized, and then how we can support the sector, especially so that it can build resilience, or it can respond to socio-economic issues. So out of this dialogue, what came about was a Lilongwe declaration, whereby the participants or the different stakeholders that were involved in this dialogue actually identified about 11 key priorities and recommendations that they would like to take up to the ministers that are responsible for fisheries. And these key priorities and recommendations actually just wanted to ensure that either small-scale fisheries and aquaculture are incorporated into the different development plans and programs. We domesticate, like the SADC protocol on fisheries or the SSF fisheries line. We try to come up with a budget that can actually contribute contribute to the development of the sectors. We enhance like productivity through aquaculture development. Quite a lot of some of the issues that were taken about was just to ensure that as a region or as SADC, we try to see how we can build our sector. And with that, that was all that we had to talk about regarding the regional dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katrina, for that presentation. I think your presentation really sort of brings it together, Katrina. If I recall the issues that came up from Caitlin's presentation to the one that was given by Ildefonse, and then also the last case study by Letu of what can unfold as public-private partnership models. So that's really good presentations. I suspect that we may not have Mr. Ipinge Munjulu available. We've been trying to reach out to him and contact him. And as far as I know, Katrina, we don't have him ready for the presentation. Are you able to confirm that, Katrina? Dr. Hlachwayo, are you there?
Yeah, Nico,
all right, colleagues.
I agree. We don't have that. So
all right, Dr. Hlachwayo, then perhaps we can...
We will go straight to Dr. Timothy.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much, colleagues. I'll try and summarize what has been discussed, and hopefully that in the end we can wrap it up. From what we've heard, I think it is clear that the vulnerability of aquatic ecosystems and the people that are dependent on fish to climate change differs substantially amongst and within the region. And I think we've seen that because of the richness of the Benguela currents, it is possible that the vulnerability of the fishers and the fisheries in that area might differ from other parts of the SADC region. And therefore, it is important for us to be region specific. But we are also aware that fishing and fish farming communities in the SADC region live in contexts that are highly vulnerable to climate change. I think this is due to a number of factors, and that fish-dependent communities and the fish ecosystems vulnerability are independent, and therefore
if the aquatic ecosystems are vulnerable, they also make the fish dependent communities that are dependent on those ecosystems equally vulnerable. And therefore, vulnerable fisheries also expose the fishes to vulnerability. Therefore, unsustainable fisheries utilization and fish farming patterns are increasingly exposing the aquatic ecosystems to people and the climate hazards. Therefore, I thought that we should reflect on the Lilongwe Declaration by going backward. Some of you might recall that in 2014, during the 23rd ordinary session of the African Heads of States and Government in Malabo in Equatorial Guinea, they agreed upon what was called the Malabo Declaration on continuing the momentum on CAADP. You remember that CAADP is one of the underlying policies for the continent for food production, including fish. And the heads of states made a number of commitments, but I think one of them that is relevant to us is where they committed themselves to enhance the resilience of livelihoods and production systems to climate change, variability, and other related risks. And specifically, they committed themselves, including the member states in the SADC, to reduce vulnerabilities of the livelihoods of the small-scale fisheries and the small-scale fish farmers through building resilience of the aquatic food systems, as well as the fish-dependent communities themselves. And therefore, this is extremely important for us to ensure that the Malabo Declaration and what we had agreed in Lilongwe, there is alignment. Therefore, in summary, I would like to reflect on some of the key elements that we should take home, as Dr. Motseki had said at the beginning, that we need to have take-home messages. You'd recall the Malabo Declaration had a time scale that is up to 2025, which is a decade or 10 years since the declaration was made. But specifically, within the commitment to reduce vulnerabilities, the heads of states committed to ensure that by the year 2025, at least that was 30% of the fish farms and the fisher households are resilient to climate change and weather-related risks. I think this is a very clear target, and my hope would be that as our ministers responsible for fisheries in the SADC make this commitment, they'll be bearing in mind that up to 2025, the communities that are dependent on fish must be resilient. And how do we do this? I think from the presentations that we heard, Ms. Francis specifically mentioned of the need to enhance the capacity for trade, regional and global. I think this is extremely important. I think the lessons that we've learned from Angola and other regions, other countries, need to be scaled up, and hence the need for us to domesticate not only the SADC protocol on fisheries, but also the SADC protocol on trade, which commits our member states to free trade in the area, as well as what Ms. Francis has told us of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But we also know that currently African government and SADC have a project called the ProFish Blue, which has a commitment on enhancing cross-border or intra-regional trade, building on what was done by a continental program on fish trade earlier on. And hence, we need to really focus on simplified trade regimes that are going to help fish producers and traders to be able to cross the borders easily and access other lucrative markets. Number two, we have heard from our presentation of the need to strengthen the producer organizations. And again, this is also a lesson that we learned from the fish trade program, where we we built the capacity of the cross-border fish traders association, particularly women and youth, so that they'll be able to communicate to each other, because cross-border fish trade is very complex, and therefore it only works for those that are properly and well organized into groups. Number 3, again, to ensure that we can provide alternative livelihoods, including aquaculture. I think good lessons that we've learned from Angola, where the communities are growing fish in the marine waters, mariculture. And this is giving the communities an extra way of producing food, but also have money to support their families. So these 3 elements that have already been demonstrated under PCC need to be scaled up. And I think there's a need for SADC to create a platform for cross-learning amongst the countries. Number 2, commitment from the Malabo is where the heads of states urged us to enhance investments for resilience building initiatives, including social security for rural workers and other vulnerable social groups, as well as the vulnerable ecosystems. And social security is extremely important, and this is where it is important that as we are developing strategies and plans for social security, the fish-dependent communities must be included in there so that they can benefit. Again, we heard from Ms. Duna on the PPP as a tool for building resilience. And here we need to ensure that we can leverage on the partnership platform, which has already been built by BCC, the member states, but also the communities and the private sectors. So the lessons are already there, and these are going to help us to ensure that we can tick on the boxes that our heads of states agreed upon in Malabo. The third and the last one is where the heads of states committed to mainstream resilience and risk management in our policies, strategies, and investment plans. But you see, often these things are easier said than done. But I think we are lucky here that BCC has already developed how to. So I think the lessons that have been developed here would help us to now work with the member states and begin to integrate them into the national policies so that the fish-dependent communities are not left out. Therefore, the next steps, one, it is important that the SADC ministers responsible for fisheries and aquaculture should urgently endorse the declaration. And I hope that Dr. Motseki is working on this. I know that this year the chairship of SADC is with the DRC. Therefore, we need to ensure this is done. Second, the member states should move to domesticate the element of the declaration into their national determined contributions, adaptation plans, as well as the biennial reporting system. The CADAP declaration has what is called biennial reports. These are done once in 2 years. Currently, a report is being prepared. Therefore, it would be important that you folks from the fish ministries and departments should interface into that process. Often it's driven by people from the ministries of agriculture, and often they leave out the fish. And therefore, it would be important that the biennial reports, when they're being completed, there must be an input from fisheries, and the lesson that we've already generated will be extremely important. Then take urgent actions to ensure to address the external negative impacts in line with the COP27 commitments, which Ms. Katrina has highlighted. And particularly, we know that the COP27 focused on loss and damage. And this is part of the social security. And therefore, when there's money being allocated to loss and damage in our countries, let us fight to ensure that the fish-dependent communities are also included in this. Mr. Chairman, let me stop here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Swans. Can we give him another round of applause?
Thanks to the presenters, and we can open it up for 5 minutes of Q&A. As we will break for another 15 minutes as we prepare the room for a policy dialogue that starts at 5:30. So, are there any questions? I'm going to take 2, 3 at a time, and then the speakers will then respond.
Yeah, thank you very much for wonderful presentations.
It's okay. You can listen.
I think my question is to Caitlin. My name is Cecil. I'm the University of Waterloo. I work on issues of dried fish and dried fish value chain. So it's a different context. I work in India, but I find this in my research work, there are certain questions that I would like to put before you. One is when this free trade kind of arrangements is coming to India, it's called SAFTA, South Asian Trade Agreements. What is happening is what I am seeing now, a lot of low value fishes, which is going to this dried fish industry, are now offloaded from other countries, big trawlers, and trawlers start catching them. And that is actually triggering this tiny traditional fishes losing the space of having that fish catch and sell it to the processors. Processors are no more interested to buy on a discrete manner, so they get bulk amount from the foreign trawlers and in the processing industry. That's why those people are losing space. That's one disturbing element that's happening. Second one is that this whole free trade making the sea space for the big trawlers, because they are able to catch everything and very little less for these traditional fishers who operate within 12 nautical miles in the ocean space. How do you really look at these issues in this context?
Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Modesta Method. I work for WW from Tanzania. My issue is about the cooperative societies. Catherine, you talked about it. Okay, from Angola, they also mentioned about it, and a little bit you have also mentioned about it. I just want to give a little bit of history. In Tanzania, you know, the way I'm seeing cooperative is you have to have collective decision, collective undertakings, and so many things together. And for us, we had Unyama policy, whereby villages had farms, and the founder of the nation, by then, Mwalimu Nyerere, had to move people to sit together so that they can share the common resources like water, electricity. And our fathers and mothers, they used to have common farms in the village, and who was advocating for cooperative society. During that time, at the initial stage, the cooperative society worked very well in tea plantations, in tobacco, you know, so many crops, especially cash crops. But now we went, that was back in 1970s, but later the cooperative died, especially when capitalism came in, because people want to own their own property resources. So the cooperative died with corruption and everything. They had very big building, machinery, everything collapsed, cotton and everything. So now I'm wondering, I see, for example, in fisheries, we have cooperative society, for example, in freshwater, Lake Victoria, but they are very sustainable in the Kenyan side than Tanzanian side. And why? Because they are cooperative society, they are linked to kinship relation, that you find a certain land having that particular society throughout, and they are really maintaining it. And no one from outside is coming to that cooperative society. You know, I mean, the Kenyan coast of Lake Victoria is dominated by law, and that place, no one can come and build a house or buy land. It is for them. So clanship and kinship is making the cooperative society to sustain and to be stronger up to now. But now, in other places of the fishery where people, migrant fishers are coming, the cooperative society, they are not existing. We have tried now to form association. The government is advocating for association, but still, I mean, we are just doing that through project, knowing that they will get money out of that project. And these are government projects. See? So once those projects, they reach to an end, those associations will also pay. So my issue is maybe people from Angola and the country, you can share with us the modality of your cooperative society you are trying to advocate. What are the modalities? Are they going to have a common property by members, or maybe everybody is going there with individual property and then they come together? Expect to know exactly the modality of the cooperative they are trying to preach it now. Because I know globalization with market dynamics, we are now in the capitalist economy. Thank you.
Last question. Nana, my boss is very strict on time. So thanks, Otaki, and thank you, speakers, for your presentations. And I guess my reflections in terms of climate change and impacts on small-scale fisheries is that it's undeniable that climate change is going to be a major impact on small-scale fisheries. They are probably the most vulnerable groups of people to climate change. But maybe something I want to put to the speakers is that how do we go about, for example, addressing this issue of the production of fisheries, the production of fisheries that's going to be impacted by climate change? So we're expecting our oceans to become less productive, and yet we're still focusing on the seafood value chain. That seems that kind of maybe missing the point somewhat. I think we need to consider diversification a lot more for small-scale fishes. And when I think diversification is not just regarding marine, but what other associated activities can these communities do that will bring about generation. And then one other aspect of this may be a very sensitive matter is the issue is if our oceans are becoming less productive, should we not also be considering a lot more in terms of protection? So how much more do we need to protect in order to ensure or maintain productivity? So I know that for the next COP15, CBD, next month, the whole global biodiversity framework and 35 targets, more ambitious targets, where does small-scale fishes stand with regard to that? Because at the end of the day, that needs to be a strong commitment as well to ensure that there is a production that will be available for small-scale fishes. Thanks.
That's great. Because there was a presentation in Portuguese, I'm going to give the Portuguese chance to ask a question in Portuguese.
We really need to quick. It's already time.
Boa tarde a todos presentes. Chamo-me Valdemar Rivera Pinto. A minha questão vai relacionada com a segunda apresentadora, a dona Aquaculture. Enquanto dizia que a Angola tem 1.600 quilômetros de costa. Na sua explanação dizia que são 102 comunidades. Este dado é equivalente. O nosso controle temos 150 comunidades. Então, tem que também pagar a fonte de seus dados. Então, parabéns por fazer uma apresentação. Muito obrigado.
Good afternoon. Thank you all the presenters for bringing material. My name is Mark Pinto. He's from Angola. Yes, my name is Mark Pinto. I come from Angola, and I have a question for Catherine. The presentation made by Catherine. It's just like an observation, not exactly a question, because you mentioned that the cost line is about 1,650 kilometers. So I think there is some mistake there. So you need to check the source of information, and also the number of fishes communities that within the presentation. It seems that it's not well captured. So we just suggesting to check the NDCs.
Thank you very much. Kathleen, I'm sure you can handle all the questions.
Chair, really need to end now.
1 minute.
Okay, I'll go through it quickly. Yeah, those
Okay,
are,
so end
at
it.
least I'll start with Director. Those are just the and definitely there are more communities. In the presentation, I said upwards of 100 plus communities. And then to tackle the question regarding how do we deal with foreign vessels with dried fish, Angola got quite strict legislation, but of course there needs to be one of the aspects that I didn't get to touch on is that with the free trade area, one of the things that is a very strong requirement is a protocol on how to handle now the changes in which how trade liberalization will impact small scale fishing. So this is something that is in the full process of the Secretariat. And yeah, I would definitely have to chat more and take some insights from my Indian compatriots around that. And then regarding the cooperatives component, we've got someone who's actually a member of the cooperative here. And I think Mike is in a much better position to answer that than I would be.